Parker, whom we are going to help support through Bear Valley, and he'll be preaching tonight. He'll also be leading singing this morning because he's really good at that. And if the choice was me or him, it was going to be him. Also, I'm really tired. So that's where we're at. I'm going to say a prayer, and then I'll give it over to Brother Moore. I think that's it. Let's pray together. Father in heaven, we thank you for this day. Thank you for the time we have together this morning. And we thank you for all the works that are done through this congregation here and through the boys' home and in the past with them as well as in the future. We're hopeful and thankful for the future with them and thankful for the report that we can give. We thank you for the many blessings that you provide each and every one of us, and we hope that you'll continue to bless them. We thank you most of all for Jesus, your son, for his sacrifice on the cross for our sins. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.
It is an absolute honor to be with you all this morning, and I am very thankful to this congregation for all you do to support our boys and help us be able to take care of boys. I looked it up this morning, and as of 8:30 this morning, in the past 37 years, this congregation has given just $95 short of $130,000 to the home. And that is incredible. That makes a huge difference in the lives of boys. I've got a little notepad here I'll pass around. If you do not receive our bulletin and you would like to, if you'd put your name and address on it, and I'll make sure you get added to our mailing list. And our bulletin, it gives a lot of regular reports about what we've got going on. It's an exciting time at Westview. In recent years, we've been able to establish some new things. And one of them is we now have a office in Oklahoma City where we operate counseling and parental training for families up having to have their children placed in an out-of-home placement. Like, we figure if we can help in that way, that's a great thing to do. Another thing we've got going on right now is we're building a new facility, actually a neighborhood in Weatherford, Oklahoma, where we're going to be establishing not really establishing, but reestablishing Westview Launch, which is for kids who have aged out of regular children or the foster care system, but still need help as they get ready to launch out into life on their own. Great thing about Weatherford, Oklahoma is they've got a great university there, Southwestern Oklahoma State University, and there are 3 trade schools within 30 minutes of where we're building our neighborhood. Additionally, there are great jobs for young people there, and those are some things that aren't available in Hollis, and that's why we looked for other opportunities for places where we could build our facility. The Westview Launch Program has been in operation for about 15 years now. It started in Hollis, and we found out very quickly boys have a hard time getting further education in Hollis after they graduate from high school. They also have a hard time finding jobs in Hollis. And so that's why we started looking for other opportunities. And there's a wonderful couple from Mustang, Oklahoma, who said, we have a house that has an apartment built on the back. And the man of the family, he was an instructor at a trade school up in the Mustang area. And they said, how about we rent out our apartment and we'll become the mentors for your boys who have graduated from high school but still need some help. And over the past several years, they have done a fantastic job helping our young men and have helped several of them graduate from trade school and get jobs and be out on their own. And they just were so good for our boys and for our young men. So we're very grateful for that. And we're looking forward to establishing and getting the neighborhood established. Went through some troubles with that project because COVID hit just as we had gotten funding to start building it. And then city regulations hit that we had to change our plans a little bit to meet the regulations. And then the gas company had a gas line going underneath the property right where we were going to build the houses. And they kept passing from one office to another as to who was supposed to authorize moving the pipeline. And finally, we found out that the chief engineer for that gas company grew up in Hollis. And so we contacted him, and next thing we know, they got approval for the gas line to move, and they moved it really quickly. So God is good, and we have started construction now. The amazing thing with that project is we had received a gift from an estate that allowed us to buy almost 5 acres of land in Weatherford, Oklahoma, just off I-40. So we'll have great visibility there that we've never had in Hollis. And because Hollis, well, there's a judge in Oklahoma who said Westview Boys Home is Oklahoma's best kept secret because nobody knows where it is. And that's true. Hollis is not very well known. It's not like Oklahoma City or Amarillo. You know, people just don't hear about Hollis. And people don't go to Hollis unless they intend to be there, generally speaking. And so having that property right up off I-40 will be a great benefit to us, and it's a great place for our boys. And so we're looking forward to that. The other amazing thing is there is a foundation that gave us a grant for building the first 3 houses on that property. All told, we got somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.25 million for creating the roadway, doing all the infrastructure, and building the houses. And that's just such a blessing. Now, when you get grants like that from foundations, you have to use the money the way they tell you to. And so that's not money we can use for other things. We have to use it for that very purpose. And so we don't have 1.2 million looking for where it can go. That money's already spoken for in that regard. Westview Boys Home started in 1956, and what happened was there was a group of Christians throughout North Texas and Southwest Oklahoma and here in the Panhandle who saw a need for another children's home in the area. And they started looking for opportunities, and there was a man who offered them an apartment building in downtown Frederick, Oklahoma. And they thought about that for a little bit and decided, you know, an apartment building downtown anywhere is not a good place to raise kids. And so they kept looking for opportunities. Right at that time, technology had changed so much, and in the farming, equipment that could do better jobs of planting and harvesting things like cotton. And so a lot of the area farmers and the families that worked on farms, machines took over a lot of that work, so farmers didn't have to have so many hands. And so people who had lived out in the country were leaving. And it would just really hurt the schools in that area. Harmon County used to have about 15 different schools throughout Harmon County. Now Harmon County only has one school system in the whole county. It's all there in Hollis. And so schools were shutting down left and right because they didn't have enough students. And so the Arnett of Hollis School District said, hey, we've got this old school building we're not using anymore. Your boys will come to school at our school. And so that's how Westview started. We bought an old school building. It was the Westview of Hollis school site with an old school building that we used as a dormitory for the first several years for $1. And then the school board helped raise $1,000 to remodel that old school building to have rooms. God truly saw a mission that he opened the doors for it to establish. And so that's how Westview got its name. It was the old Westview school site. I do have pictures up here. They have nothing to do with what I'm figure. People would rather look at our boys than look at me. And I understand that, and it doesn't hurt my feelings at all. I'm very proud. These are pictures. Like I said, I've been there for 29 years now, and these are pictures of our boys through the years that I've been there. And I'll tell you stories about some of them. I won't tell you which one's which, though. It's kind of exciting to me to see the way God established Westview. And through the years, we've changed. We started with that little, about 3-acre piece of land where the Westview School had been. And we built 2 houses on that property because we found out that raising boys in a dormitory taught them how to live in an institution and not how to live in a family. And so we started building 2 houses. The first 2 houses we built were right there on that property where the school was. And they were about 3,800 square feet of floor space, which is a pretty good sized house in reality. But excuse me, when you have 12 to 15 boys in the house, which was the way things worked back then, that got awful crowded real quick. Especially when the house parents lived in that same house and their children in addition. And so we started looking to build some more houses, and we ended up having several properties that we either purchased or that were donated to us. And now, today, we have 6 houses in Harmon County, scattered throughout the county, and we have about 1,500 acres of land in Harmon County alone. And that's where our home is. It's scattered throughout Harmon County. Aside from those 2 houses built, one right next door to the other, some of our houses are about 11 miles, 12 miles apart from each other. We have 2 houses that are right across the street from each other, but it's a quarter mile from one doorpost to the other because they sit so far back off the road. And it's a great place for kids. A lot of the boys who come to live at Westview aren't used to country life, have not experienced it in the past. And quite honestly, when I moved to Westview, I wasn't knowledgeable of country life either. I grew up in Maine, where I always lived in cities, lived out in the country for a few years in one, but even it was right between 2 cities that were about 15 miles apart from each other. Hollis is about 30 miles from Altus, which is the closest city. Altus and Childress, Texas are the 2 closest places to us. And so that was a bit of a culture shock for me. And that's what our boys go through. There was one time there was a boy who had been in a detention facility up in El Reno or Yukon, Oklahoma, right in that area. And he grew up in Oklahoma City. And I went up to interview him, and we ended up deciding he could come and stay at Westview. So when I went up to pick him up and bring him to Westview, we were driving a little bit north of Chickasha, Oklahoma, which was south of Oklahoma City. And he looked out in a field and saw a pasture with lots of cows. And he looked at me and he said, "Wow, I've never seen cows in the wild before." Yeah. Hollis was a little bit of a surprise for him. Great surprise. Livestock is great for kids. In Oklahoma, we have it was a state law back then, and it's changed a little bit now. But back then, and still so, Oklahoma is a no-pass play state, which means if you're not passing in school, you don't get to participate in other activities like sports and livestock projects and show your animals in livestock shows. I had one boy in my first year come into my office one day, and he said, "Mr. Moore, I want to raise a show pig." And I said, "Ray, there is no way." And he said, "Well, that's what my caregivers, my house parents," we call them caregivers now just because of political reasons, and I'll explain that in a little bit. House parents said, "If you'd let me raise a show pig, they'd let me." And I said, "Ray, Oklahoma's no pass, no play state. You have 1 C, 1 D, and 4 Fs in school. And there's no way that I'm going to let you." And he kept begging me and just kept pestering me. And finally I said, "Okay, Ray, here's the deal. Come this summer when boys get to go and stay with family and so forth for 3 weeks, if come livestock show season you're not passing in your classes, then you're going to stay here on campus and work to pay me back for that pig." And he said, "I'll do it. I'll do anything. I just want to raise a pig." And I said, "Okay, Ray, what kind of pig do you want?" And he wanted a Duroc. Now, I imagine folks here, many of you know what a Duroc is, but for any that don't, it's a reddish-brown pig that back in those days was the ideal cream of the crop pig. Just good muscling and low fat and really an amazing animal. And I said, "Okay, well, that's a good choice." And he said, "Well, Mr. Moore, I promise I'll have passing grades." And so we bought him a pig, it was a little piglet, probably about this big when we got it. And I drive out in the afternoons driving around our campus, and I would see him sitting on a hay bale inside the pig pen. And his pig sometimes would be sitting right next to him, and Ray would be patting his pig with one hand and have a book studying in the other. Sometimes he'd be sitting there on that bale of hay, and he'd be rolling the ball to his pig, and his pig would hit it with its snout back to him. He had taught his pig to play catch, I guess. Well, every week we'd get a notice from school telling us which boys were failing and how many classes they were failing in. And over the time, Ray went from, at one point, he was failing as many as 5 classes. He went from failing 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. And finally, his name was no longer on the failing list. That was some time before show season was even here. And so he went to livestock show. His pig did well in the county show and in the local show. And he ended up making it into the premium sale, which, again, for people who don't understand that, that's where people bid on an animal as if they were going to buy it, and they pay that kid for raising that animal. The kid gets to keep the money and the animal so they can go to the next show at the state level. Well, Ray's pig made it to the premium sale, and Ray made good money in that premium sale. And his pig just was, it was an amazing pig, honestly. And 2 weeks after the county show, report cards came out. And Ray came by my office. He was walking down the hallway, and I said, Ray, come here just a minute. And he came in. I said, have you seen your report card yet? He said, no, sir. And I said, come here, you got to see. He missed AB honor roll by 2 points in one, or by 2 points in one class. And he looked at his report card, and he started getting angry. And I said, Ray, what are you so angry about? He said, Mr. Moore, I can't believe I came within 2 points of AB honor roll and missed it. He said, I promise at the end of this next quarter, which was the last quarter of the school year, he said, this next quarter, I guarantee I'll be on AB honor roll. And I said, Ray, if your lowest grade is a C+, I'm going to be happy. And he said, no, I promise. Well, the next report cards came out, and Ray came into my office, and he said, did you get my report card? And I said, yes, I did. He said, how'd I do? He missed straight A's by 3 points. 2 points in one class and 1 point in another. I'd say animal projects are good for kids. I've seen this happen more than once. And Ray ended up going to Oklahoma Christian University and ended up working for a nonprofit. He actually ended up working for one of those big accounting firms like Price Waterhouse, tracking the monetary value of like 27 different currencies. And then he decided, I'm tired of doing things just for the money. I want to make a difference in people's life. So he went to work for a nonprofit because he saw the value of Westview Boys Home being a nonprofit in his life. And while he was a student at Oklahoma Christian, every year he'd be recognized by the College of Business as one of their outstanding students. And one year I went up to the dinner that they had for those receiving awards because we had been told he was going to receive an award. And as we sat at dinner, I said, can you explain to me how it is that a kid that came to us with 1C, 1D, and the rest of your grades were Fs, turned things around so much that you're recognized by this university as being one of their outstanding students? He said, well, Mr. Moore, you remember when I came to you and asked you to raise, if I could raise a show pig? I hadn't thought about it for a little while. I said, yeah, I remember that. And he said, well, that day you put your trust in me. And that was something nobody had ever done before. And I wasn't going to let you down. He said, and then once I learned how much fun passing was, failing was no longer an option. To this day, every time I think about that day and visiting with him and about the difference in his life, even still today, it amazes me because he's doing some good things in his life. And that's thanks to you and the other congregations and other individuals who help support the home. It's a lot of fun working at Westview. It's hard. Boys don't come to us because their lives are great and because things are really easy for them. Usually when a boy comes to us, it's because they've been orphaned, abandoned, abused, neglected. Some of them have gotten into trouble with the law and don't need to be incarcerated. They just need some good supervision. And honestly, I'd much rather have them with us than back where they'd been, where they were making all the mistakes they've been making. Like I said, I've been at Westview for almost 29 years now, and prior to coming to Westview, I was a full-time preacher, part-time police officer. I worked with a department in Fort Dodge, Iowa, as a police chaplain, and then when I moved to Plainwell, Michigan, where I also preached, I was a police chaplain for a time, and then they said, well, we're going to send you to law enforcement academy. And I became a part-time officer with the department there. And one of the things that frustrated me in both places was when boys got in trouble with the law, we only had two options. One was to put them in jail and in prison or juvenile prison. The other was to leave them in a dysfunctional family setting where they were going to keep having problems. And that frustrated me because I knew there had to be something better than those two choices. And had one of the members of our congregation went on vacation to visit some family. And when he came back to Plainwell, he knew that I was looking to do some other form of ministry other than full-time preaching. And he said, oh, Chip, I found the perfect place for you. He said, my brother-in-law works for Westview Boys Home in Hollis, Oklahoma. And he said, I think that'd be a good place for you. And so I sent in my resume. The executive director of the home at that time flew up to Michigan to interview me. And a couple of weeks later, he said, well, if you want to give it a try, we'll see how things go. Come on down and we'll try things. But the Oklahoma headed south towards Hollis, and there was grass growing on the road. And I was thinking, I had never been to Hollis, and I was thinking, oh my, what have I gotten us into? My wife and kids were still up in Michigan waiting to sell our house. So when I brought her down to Hollis, I didn't come through Eric and go down that highway that had grass growing up in the roads. I went through Oklahoma City, down to Lawton, across to Altus and Duke and Gould, and right after that comes Hollis. Makes Hollis not seem quite so desolate. But it has been a wonderful place to raise our kids and to be there working with the boys' home. Like I mentioned, some of the boys get court placed. Oklahoma courts will not place a boy with us because we do not have a contract with the state of Oklahoma, either for Department of Human Services or for the court system. And the reason we don't is back when I went to Westview, for us to have a contract with the state, we had to say if our boys didn't want to go to church, they didn't have to. Well, we try to bring total balance to a boy's life, whether it be emotional, educational, social, just work, and of course, spirituality is very important. And we knew that our boys going to church was a critical thing for them to get their lives turned around. Well, Oklahoma doesn't send boys, but the state of Texas does. Matter of fact, I've become very good friends through the years with several probation officers in the state of Texas that are more than happy to have boys come and live with us. Now, Oklahoma judges, some of them found an interesting way around the fact that we wouldn't sign a contract with the state. So long as we weren't billing the court for boys to come and live with us, and we're able to do that because folks like you help support our work, then they would give parents a choice and say, okay, your boy's leaving your house. He can either go to Westview Boys Home or I'm going to put him in juvenile prison. And it's amazing how many times people say, well, I'll put him in Westview Boys Home rather than having him go to prison because I think that'll be so much better for him. We had one boy who was in that situation, and his name was Danny. And about every 6 months, I'd have to take Danny back to court for follow-up hearings for the judge to decide what was going to happen with Danny's case. Danny, first time I took him to court, my experience in law enforcement, having been in court, I told Danny, tomorrow when we get ready to go to court, you're going to be wearing dress pants, dress shirt, and a tie. He said, nobody dresses like that to go to court. And I said, well, we do. And so he complied with my instruction, and we went into the courtroom. You have to wait outside the courtroom until your case is being heard because they don't want other people hearing other juveniles' cases. And so as his case got called into the courtroom, we went into the courtroom, and the judge looked at Danny and said, Danny, You are looking good, and I've heard some great things about the way things are going for you at Westview, and I just want to let you know, keep it up. When we left court that day, Danny just looked totally stunned. And he said, that man has never had anything nice to say to me before. I said, Danny, what's the difference? He said, I noticed, like you said, all the other kids going into court were wearing T-shirts and jeans with holes in them. He said, but I looked good. And I said, yes, you did. I said, you can take off your tie now. And he did very quickly. And he said, that, and I treated the judge with respect the way you told me to. And I whenever I'd talk to him, I'd say, Your Honor. He said, none of the other kids ever do that. I never did it before. And so things went well. Well, time passed, and we'd gone to a few of these different hearings, and the judge passed away. And the man who was the prosecuting attorney who brought charges against Danny in the first place became the judge. And when we went into court that next time, he said, Danny, because I was the prosecuting attorney, he said, I can step down from being the one who oversees your case from this point forward, if you want me to, and I won't be offended, but I'll recuse myself. But if you'll trust me, then I promise I'll treat you fairly. And Danny, through his lawyer, said, I'm going to trust you. That time when we went to court, the new judge said, I have watched you over the past few years. Several times I've seen your case. And next time you come to this courtroom, if you're still doing well, I'm going to let you go back home to live with your mom. Sure enough, the next time we went to court, Danny didn't come back to Westview with me. Had to come back down to get his clothes and stuff, but that was an exciting trip for him. Several years later, I was broadcasting a basketball game in Merritt, Oklahoma, because I'm the voice of the Hollis Tigers. And as I'm sitting there in the top of the gymnasium with a walkway behind me, a man comes walking up and sits down on the steps right beside me. And I'm paying attention to the game because when you're broadcasting basketball, things are moving quick and you can't turn and look away because if you do, you'll miss something. Well, when we went to commercial break, I turned and I looked, and sitting there beside me was Danny, a man. And he said, saw you over here and I had to come over and say hi and tell you thank you. He said, my wife's niece is playing in the next game, and yes, I'm married, and my wife and I are about to have our first baby. When Danny was very, very young, his dad had abandoned him and his mom. And as Danny was talking to me that day, he said, the only reason I know how to be a good dad and a good husband is because you and the other men at Westview taught me how. And I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to be the good man, the good husband, and the good dad you taught me to be. Here a couple of years ago, I was looking on Facebook, and Danny's wife had posted, they now have 3 kids who love fishing. As a matter of fact, their oldest son was in a fishing competition where he won a lifetime license, fishing license for the state of Oklahoma, because he's a good fisherman. He learned that from his dad. His dad did not learn that from me. But through the day, I saw several different posts that they were putting on Facebook, pictures of the kids fishing, of their dad helping them bait the hook and things like that. And about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, I got another picture that popped up on Facebook. And it was those 3 kids in sleeping bags around a campfire. And Danny's wife said, they didn't last, but Danny and I are going back fishing. We'll be right here, though, right where we can keep an eye on the kids. Danny is a good dad. I constantly see pictures of him and his kids, whether it be softball games or fishing, just taking them to go places and do things. Husband who provides for his family. And it just amazes me to watch his life the way it's going. Folks, I tell you that not only is Danny's life better like that, I've had several men come back and bring their families to Westview because they want their kids to see where they grew up. And the reason they have a place they can call home is because you help provide for them the way you do. It just amazes me to see these situations like that. To see young people whose path was headed the wrong way, that because good people care and are willing to make a difference, their lives are so much better. So it's getting close for time for me to end. But I want to tell you thank you so much. I love the work I'm doing. That's why I've been there for 29 years. I love seeing the difference that's being made in the lives of young people. We couldn't do that without the good people that provide for our home. It's not cheap running a children's home. Insurance alone is devastating. People don't like paying for insurance, but if we didn't pay the insurance, we couldn't take kids either. So thank you so much for all the good you do. It's exciting. We do have a small fund that is an endowment, and it's not a big endowment, but every year it provides about $15,000 to help us take care of kids. That's an endowment that was established by one of our former donors who passed away, and when he passed away, he left Westview in his will and said, I want to give money for an endowment that does two things. First and foremost, I want to make sure that every boy on your campus always gets birthday gift and Christmas gift. Secondly, I want Westview Boys Home to receive some funding to help pay for their operations. We've got some great things going on you might be interested in. I mentioned the Westview launch. We're looking to raise money to build a couple more houses there, and we're hoping to be able to provide a home for up to 20 kids, 20 young people who have aged out of traditional children's homes and foster care. Another project we're working on right now is we're building some greenhouses. We're building 2 greenhouses on our property, and one of the greenhouses is going to be at one site and one's going to be at, and we're going to teach boys how to raise things, whether it be edible things like vegetables and herbs and things like that, but we're also going to teach them how to raise flowers and trees, and we're going to build a nursery to establish new trees. And one of the things I see in this is a lot of our boys have seen the ugly side of life. So raising flowers can help them come to appreciate the beauties of life as well. And we're going to teach them not only how to do soil-based growing, but I have a hobby of hydroponic gardening. I have a little grow tent where I grow basil and parsley and chives, and I also grow lettuce. I have a blueberry bush indoors, and I just had to hand pollinate it. And I'm going to teach boys how to do those kinds of things. We've got other caregivers who are also into gardening, both traditional. That's what we want to share with our boys, because that's a life skill that once they grow up and leave, if ever they get to the point where groceries are hard to afford, then they can raise some food for themselves. And so that's something we're going to be teaching the boys. If that's a project you'd be interested in helping with, we could certainly use the help. And just like I said, thank you so much for all the good you've done for our boys through the years. You make the work we do possible every week, every year, every month. We don't have the big endowment to have all our bills paid automatically every month. Every month we depend on the support that comes in from good people who care about the work we are doing, who have hearts that are open to the needs of children. So thank you for caring and being willing to support the work we're doing.